As many of you know, I have been studying and practicing the science of mind for over 30 years. And one of the many things that I like about it is its inclusivity. One of our what we believe statements is, and I'm going to quote here, we believe in the individualization of the Spirit in us, and that all people are individualizations of the one Spirit. So that does not exclude anyone. We're also dedicated to a global heart vision, which includes among its statements, we see a world in which borders are irrelevant, which includes we envision a world in which we live and grow as one global family that respects and honors the interconnectedness of all life.
Yes.
And it's within that context that I speak with you today on Islam. And I am going to give you a little bit of history, a little bit of common practices, and a wonderful spiritual lesson from the Sufis. Now, the word Islam means voluntary submission to God, or simply submission or surrender. And then Muslim is the Arabic word for one who submits to God or to Allah. Now, Allah, A-L-L-A-H, does not just mean God. It means the God. Because back in the early days, people worshipped a number of different gods. And so it was important to emphasize that there was only one God. Now, I'm going to start out here in the year 610. In the year 610, there lived a man by the name of Muhammad, who was an extraordinary person. But he was a person. He was not a god. At that time, he was about 40 years old. He had been orphaned when he was an early child, a young child. And so he was brought up by his uncle. He couldn't read, and he could barely write his name, so we could say he really couldn't write either. But he was highly respected. And so in the year 610, he was 40 years old. He believed in one God. And apparently he had some familiarity with the Bible because he would go off to caves and pray and sit in silence. And it was on one of these occasions when he was sitting in silence that this man came up to him in the cave and rather assertively said, I've got a message for you from God and I want you to take it. And Muhammad said, well, I can't read, I can't write. Now we know, of course, that people who cannot read and write have to have a very good memory. If he was a caravan leader and a merchant, he obviously had a good memory to rely upon. So what it basically amounted to is, after a little bit of argument, it turned out that that man was the archangel Gabriel. And so he started revealing to Muhammad this message that eventually became the Quran. And of course, Muhammad couldn't write it down or anything, so he had to remember it and take it back to someone who would write it down for him. Now these messages continued for the next 23 years, off and on. Gabriel would come to him from time to time. It wasn't always in a cave. So at least one time it was on the back of a camel. And he would give him the message, and Muhammad would take it to someone and ask them to write it down. Now, interestingly, for me, the Quran is an extension of the Bible. It was not a replacement for the Bible. It was an addition to it. And it was very important to Muhammad and to the students of the Quran to realize that this came directly from God. It was not a lot of different books and so forth. And so it came directly from God by means of Gabriel. So for about 23 years, he continued to receive these messages from God. Now, he had a very devoted wife, and he would go back and tell her this, and she supported him entirely. And she is considered to have been the first Muslim. As I said, Muhammad was a man. He had children. And interestingly, during the next 23 years, which were the last 23 years of his life, because he died when he was 63, he became a great leader, a great teacher. He became a great spiritual leader as well. And he was able to unite the tribes of Arabia, something that hadn't been done before. And from that point on to about the 1600s, Islam continued to expand. And by the 1600s, it was the greatest civilization in the world. During this time, even though Muhammad was a great leader and respected as a great statesman, he continued to live very simply. He continued to mend his clothes and do his own cooking and milk his own goats, which I thought was very interesting. I can relate to that. And now a little bit about the Quran. As I said, this was in addition to the Bible, not something that was separate from it. Actually, Islam is very closely related to Christianity and Judaism. But, you know, we always run into that thing about language barriers. The Quran was not translated into English until 1649. And it wasn't even written as a single document until 20 years after Muhammad had died. But it was written at that time as a single document, and it hasn't been changed very much, though there have been a lot of commentaries written about it. Now, the people who know this say that it is most beautifully presented when it is spoken in Arabic. And that's why sometimes when we read the Quran, it doesn't make a lot of sense to us because we don't hear it spoken in that beautiful language. Of course, as the Quran, as Islam spread, it became part of the different cultures of the many different countries. And as it became part of the cultures, then it was interpreted in different ways. And so therefore, we know that many times what we consider to be a practice of Islam really is partly a practice of the particular country where it was practiced. In some places, it's very conservative. In other places, it's more liberal. The Quran really was a book of lessons. Lessons of truth and love, a guide to life, a guide to how we can be human, a cure for troubles, and a well of mercy and compassion. What it never was something that taught inhuman acts. Any of the things that we have been hearing about, that we know have been happening in the last few decades. This was neither taught nor condoned by Islams. Now, as far as practice is concerned, Muhammad and using the Quran came up with 5 practices called the 5 pillars of Islam. And these are practiced by Muslims all over the world to some degree, as to the degree that they can. At least they know that they're supposed to be practicing these 5 pillars. And they are, first of all, to bear witness to Allah, to the God. The second one is to pray 5 times a day and to cleanse themselves before they have the prayer. And they pray at sunrise, just after noon, later in the afternoon, shortly after sunset, after dark, and I don't know if I left one out or not, but anyway, 5 times a day. And they pray facing Mecca, and they have certain actions that go along with it. I was talking to one of my friends who grew up in the religion, and she said that she felt that the actions that go along with the prayer are very important for the brain circulation, getting these ideas in the brain. The third pillar, and these are called pillars, P-I-L-L-A-R-S, because they support Islam. And the third one is fasting from dawn to sunset during the holy month of Ramadan. And this is to emphasize the importance of spirituality over the physical requirements of food and this sort of thing. The fourth pillar is sharing one's wealth with the poor. And the fifth one is the pilgrimage to Mecca at least once during one's life. Now, clearly, everybody's not able to do these, but people who are able to take this pilgrimage to Mecca, the Muslims who are able to do this, consider it probably as the greatest thing that ever happens in their life. Now, there in this trip, it's considered to be a reenactment of life. And the people who are there dress very simply. The men dress in 2 pieces of unhemmed white cloth, and the women wear simple white dresses. They have various other activities that they are required to do while they're there. And they also visit this shrine, which is in the middle of the city of Mecca, which is considered to be the holiest spot. And it's called the Kaaba. Now, in the world today, there are over 1 billion Muslims. That's roughly a fifth of the population. As I said, they reached their highest point as far as being a great civilization, around 1600, and then they started a decline in the 1700s. In the United States today, there are more than 3 million Muslims. And I read recently that in New York City, they have more than 900 police officers. And most of them have been in the military. Now, we are profiting every day from the expansions and the growth of the Muslim communities, because they kept the intellectual fires glowing and growing during what we now hear as the Dark Ages. We consider it to have been the Dark Ages of Europe. And so their advances in science and mathematics, in medicine, architecture, philosophy, have been just immeasurably important for our society. Okay, here in Nashville, the mosque is located at 2515 12th Avenue South. And when I visited there, they gave me an English translation of the Quran. They're very active in the community. They are involved in fundraising, and they hold various events for the community as a whole. Now, their mosque there, which they call Islamic Community or Islamic Center Nashville, is very simple. And I've been in others, and they are very simply decorated. They have geometric designs, but they don't have any pictures, any statues, or anything there that might suggest some God other than Allah. Okay. Now, I would like to talk a little bit about Sufism. Sufism is Islamic mysticism. As far as I'm concerned, it's the most similar part of their teaching to the science of mind. And as I said, it's the mystic arm. And Ernest Holmes, our founder, has said that mystics in all religions tend to come up with about the same messages. And so it's not surprising that their teachings, and we had a good example of two of them that David read for us, Rumi and Hafiz, that their teachings are very similar to our own. The Sufis want to be more aware of their spiritual truth. They not only want to be more aware of their spiritual truth, they want to be as aware of their spiritual truth as Muhammad was. They want to be just like that. And my fondest writing among the Sufi writings has to do with the heart. They consider that the heart is the temple for that divine spark that is in every one of us. And it sounds very much like what we teach here in Science of Mind. But they don't consider the heart just to be one chamber. They consider it to be 4 layers, or they might consider it to be like 4 spheres, one nested inside the other. And the outer layer of the heart is the breast area, and that is the connection between the personality and spirituality. Now, just inside that is the heart proper. And the heart proper is deeper knowing and faith and greater awareness. And of course here we are talking of spirituality, not the physical heart. The third layer is called the inner heart. And the inner heart is the place of direct knowing. And then the inside one, the innermost one, is called the innermost heart. And that is a place of experience. You know, we've all been into a place where we knew something but we couldn't describe it. And we didn't need to describe it. And that's what the innermost heart is like. It's a feeling that is beyond words, beyond thought, beyond description. Now, another teaching that they have that I like is called the recognition of the 7 souls. They consider that we have 7 souls, and those 7 souls represent the stages of evolution. However, on a spiritual level, they have additional meanings. Now, those 7 souls are the mineral soul, the plant soul, the animal soul, the personal soul, the human soul, the secret soul, and the secret of secrets soul. Now, the mineral soul has to do with balance, rigidity, and flexibility. I think it probably on a spiritual level is talking about assertiveness, when to be assertive and when to be less assertive. The plant soul, or the vegetable soul, has to do with nourishing the spirit. It has to do with food and exercise, and I think of soul food when I think of that particular soul. The animal soul has to do with the balancing of passions. Fire, the passion with anger is a passion, and fear is a big passion as well. The personal soul is balancing ego. The secret soul, the human soul is the next one, and that is the seat of compassion. The secret soul is a place where one feels the presence of God in and around, and inspired by music and by nature and various bits of art and that sort of thing. The secret of secret souls is very much like the innermost heart. It's a place where one realizes the presence of the divine spirit. Now, in order to remember these 7 souls, they have something called the metaphor of the carriage. Now, I'm sure that after you leave here today, you'll remember the metaphor of the carriage, but I hope you'll remember what it's a metaphor for. So, the metaphor of the carriage, the axles and the wheels of the carriage represent the mineral soul, the assertiveness, positive and negative. The carriage itself is a metaphor for the plant or the vegetable soul. The 2 horses pulling the carriage represent the animal soul. The driver of the horses represents the personal soul. And then in the back, the owner, who's riding in the back of the carriage, is the secret soul, the human soul, and the secret of secret soul. So there are three of them back there. However, this owner is not going to get anywhere. Those three most important souls are not going to get anywhere if the other four are not functioning properly. So if one of the wheels runs off of the carriage, then there we go. If the carriage itself is tattered, if the horses decide they're going to go over and graze on the pasture somewhere, then that's a mess. If the driver decides he's going to go into a pub and have a pint, then there that goes. So, in order for the three most important, I'm gonna call them the most important souls, to get where they're going, then everything has to be functioning properly. And as I was thinking about this, I thought about Muhammad's life. He was an amazing, as a matter of fact, of course, he's known as the prophet. He is known as the final prophet. Even though in the Quran they recognize Jesus and Abraham and Moses and other prophets from the Bible, but Muhammad was the final one. And as I look at what I read about his life, I thought his carriage was moving forward perfectly in every way. He was obviously a person who took care of himself. He was able to be assertive when he needed to be. He was able to be gentle when he needed to be. He was able to provide the nourishment for his spirit by all of his actions and by the food that he ate. He was obviously a person who had control of his passions. Now, he was a passionate person. I mean, he was a father of some children, so he did live a natural life in that respect. He also did not allow his ego to go anywhere. He was balanced in ego. And clearly, his human soul, his secret soul, and his secret of secret souls were delivered in the right place at the right and perfect time. So I encourage you now to, as you move through and remember this metaphor, to keep your axles greased, keep your carriage in good repair, feed the horses, be friendly with the driver, and you will get to your destination. Namaste.